Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Isaac back here with you with a brand new episode of The Unorthodox Social Worker, where we do discuss all things social work from an unorthodox perspective. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff, so we can expose this kind of content to a broader audience of people. And if you did want to know further information about myself and my background as a social worker, please check out one of my first two videos where I do go into further detail about my history as a social worker. So, off to the topic at hand today, we are going to be talking about the case of the Moms for Housing case. If you have been watching the news here in the Bay Area, and I've even heard that it's garnered some national attention, then you're probably already aware of this situation that's going on. And the headline today was that these mothers were being evicted from the property that they began to occupy. So if you don't know about this story, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what happened. So basically, it looked like on November 18th, there was a group of homeless mothers, I guess, they say they couldn't find any kind of affordable housing. So what did they do? They identified I believe it's a single family home, a property in West Oakland, and they actually got into that property because no one was occupying it. I guess you could say in legal terms, they broke into the property. They actually upgraded it. It sounded like they added improvements to the property to make it livable. The utilities were turned on. I don't really know the details about that, but they made this unoccupied property a livable housing situation. And due to the fact that they said there is no affordable housing for them and their kids, they are going to occupy this house and they are refusing to leave. So you might ask, well, does anybody own the property? Does anybody not own the property? Why is it unoccupied? So apparently it was bought at a very cheap price in a foreclosure. I believe about $500,000, something like that, within the past year, which is actually a great bargain here in the Bay Area and in West Oakland. I'd say most of the houses over there are going for at least 700,000, 800,000, probably closer to a million, if not more than a million. So it turns out that somebody did own this property, and they plan to turn this single family home into some type of transitional housing for, it sounds like, transitional age youth, like 18 to 24-year-old youth. Their plans were to turn this into a living quarters or some type of employment training center for at-risk, or however they framed it, underprivileged youth. And so what happened? Of course, the property owners demanded that these four homeless mothers, vacate the unit, and they went into the eviction process, so forth and so on. Before they actually evicted them, they offered to pay them X amount of dollars to leave the property, and offered to provide them shelter through Catholic Charities, and that's a nonprofit in Oakland, with the hopes that they would get into shelter there, and perhaps that Catholic Charities would find some type of suitable, affordable housing for these mothers and their children. So that is the basic story. And then, of course, this all built up. It was gaining national attention. They did a very good job of gaining media attention, gaining people to support them, having different professionals represent them and support them in justifying them to be able to stay in this property. Okay, and then now today, the sheriffs came to the property this morning in West Oakland. I believe it was on Magnolia Street. The sheriffs came in. They attempted to abate the unit, to get these moms out of the housing. I think they said two of them were arrested, so it sounds like two of these moms probably refused to leave, and then the sheriffs said, well, you refusing to leave, you're going to get booked into jail. So these mothers got booked into jail. Two of them, they got arrested. Who knows how long they'll be booked in county jail, Santa Rita County Jail, the same jail I used to actually work at when I worked with a nonprofit. So that's the basic story. That's the basic background. Um, so I did, as this story was going on, I kind of just read the headlines. I didn't really read too many articles, but just by reading a headline in an article or something, I kind of got the gist of it. This morning, after reading about this current news, I think from somebody on Facebook, I said, oh, they're getting evicted today. Let me read up on this. And I did read up on it, and there wasn't too much detail. As the media kind of likes to give a broad overview and doesn't really like to go into the details of things. After reading these articles, these are the kind of questions I have about this specific case. The first thing I would like to know is, have these homeless mothers ever accessed shelter services, homeless service, homeless service providers? Have they accessed any type of homeless services in the county? Through the few articles I read today, there was nothing stating about what their experience was like trying to get affordable housing. The main point they got across was that they couldn't find affordable housing, but I would like to know the details. Did they ever access homeless services? How were those homeless services? Were they satisfied with them? Were they not? That's something I'd like to know. I'd like to know just their experience working within homeless services. The other thing they don't talk about, and I think that's kind of getting overlooked, is what's up with the kids. And I'd probably, assume or understand that they don't want to, they want to maintain the privacy of their kids. But every time I hear about this story, of course, I do feel bad for the mothers, but it's almost like I'm crying inside for these children. Not only the fact that they live in a place where their parents can't afford to have them stably housed and provide a stable housing, but then maybe all of the trauma or confusion or whatever is happening right now, I'm sure the kids are being affected by it. And I actually really do, feel bad for the kids, feel compassionate for the kids. I used to work with children, and then I decided at a certain point, I'm just going to stick with social services and work with adults, because when you work with kids and there's an injustice or something going on with the kids, it's too much kind of for my heart to take. My emotions kind of get involved. So definitely, I want to know what's up with the kids. How are the kids doing? How are they processing this whole situation that's going on, to where they really don't understand what's going on, but they know there's a big hype about them and their mom. Okay, so those are the kind of things that the news articles leave out. How was these mothers' experiences accessing homeless services, and how are the kids doing? Okay, now I used to work in Alameda County, so I'm very familiar with the homeless services there. And there is a program that is called the Family Front Door. This is run by Alameda County COC, or you could say the homeless services provided by Alameda County. And they run a call center to where if you are a homeless family, so not a homeless individual, but you are a parent with children, this is the phone line you would call to be able to access any type of shelter services, getting into permanent housing, things of that nature. And that, even though it's funded by the county, the job of putting people in shelters, assigning them to whatever the shelters are, and for intaking these homeless families, that falls upon, I believe it was contracted out to two nonprofits. I'm not going to say the names of the nonprofits, but I know these two nonprofits were in charge of this call center, and they are in charge of assigning people to shelters. And then most of these shelters are not run by the state. There are also nonprofit agencies who provide homeless shelters, and then who get paid by the county of Alameda to shelter these people. And I know from experience, I've had many homeless families I've worked with in the past in my program, that the only option we have to give to people to get into shelter for families is they have to call the family front door. I would say the vast majority of the time, at least 90% of the time, when a family calls the family front door. They're homeless. They have nowhere to go. Unfortunately, there's not enough shelter beds for families to immediately get into shelter. So the family front door will tell them, sorry, at this time there is no shelters open for you. It might be days, weeks, months before you can actually get into a shelter. And maybe they'll do something like get them a motel voucher for a few weeks. And then kind of after that, they're on their own. There's no shelter. So this goes back to my theory that both San Francisco City and County of Alameda, if they're not going to have enough open shelter beds for all the homeless people, we need to have enough open shelter beds for families, for homeless children. Okay, if we're not going to build enough shelter beds for individual adults, we really need to build enough shelter beds for homeless kids. We cannot have kids being homeless in the streets of America in one of the richest areas of the whole nation. That to me is ridiculous. So my guess is that probably these moms for housing probably did call this family front door hotline and were probably told, sorry, there's no shelter. Maybe we can put you up in a hotel for a week or two, but that's it. And unfortunately, you're going to have to be homeless. Maybe they'll encourage them. Maybe you can go live with a family or friend until we have something ready for you. So this really kind of speaks to not the quality of service, but the amount of available shelter beds. We need to build enough shelter beds for homeless children. And even though that apparently Catholic Charities offered to help these families out, they're only getting that special treatment because they brought this whole thing to the media. I know for the vast majority of the clients I've had that are homeless with children, they call the family front door and they have to wait months to get into a shelter. What are they supposed to do? And then especially a lot of them are experiencing like domestic violence, and they can't, they're going to experience domestic violence if they don't get put into a safe, stable shelter, and they could be victimized. So we do need to get more shelter beds for the kids. That is something that needs to be a top priority. So now, why do I think these people, these mothers for housing, are doing this? I think the mothers for housing are well aware that under the current state, county, whatever, federal housing laws, that they had no chance of staying in that unit. According to our society, free market, capitalist, this is society, the society that bases ownership and things like that on worth. I'm pretty sure that these mothers knew that they were going to get evicted. I don't think they expected to put up this fight and set this media ablaze. They knew they were going to get evicted. And they even said themselves that by them staying in the house and refusing to leave, they are practicing a form of nonviolent civil disobedience. So they're well aware, in my opinion, that what they're doing is against the law. So why did they do this? Now, I believe they are doing this more as activists, okay? They are doing this to bring the attention to the issue of homelessness, and also more specifically the issue of homeless families and how the quality of services, housing, and what's being offered to homeless families in Alameda County is very substandard, long wait lists, things of that nature. I believe, and I believe this is very courageous of the mothers. They are basically sacrificing themselves, and they are sacrificing their families to bring attention to this issue, okay? They're basically calling out the system. They're saying, look, the system is broken. They're not able to provide me anything adequate, so I refuse to leave. They are sacrificing themselves. I mean, they just got evicted. They're all going to have an eviction notice on their credit report now. Anytime that they attempt to apply for housing through a landlord in the future, that eviction notice is going to pop up, and then they're going to greatly decrease their ability or greatly decrease their chances of a landlord wanting to rent to them because they have an eviction on their record. The only chance of a landlord or somebody taking them in would be based off that they feel some type of compassion for these mothers. And yet again, they're sacrificing their kids, because these parents are getting, two of them got arrested. What's going to happen to the kids? Are the kids going to go with an aunt, uncle, ally to the cause? Are they going to go to CPS? So they're not only sacrificing themselves, they're sacrificing their children in a way as well. So nothing but respect, admiration, and kind of respecting of their bravery to stand up and to speak upon some of these unjust laws, policies, and systematic barriers that, in their case, they state that poor, people of color face in America. You can almost compare it to like Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi. They practiced a nonviolent civil disobedience. They knew they were going against the law. At the time of Martin Luther King, segregation was law. And he figured, I don't care if segregation is law, the law is unjust. And I have my right to practice nonviolent civil disobedience. And I feel like the mothers are taking the same strategy. They know that the system was going to evict them. Was going to evict them. They are doing this. They are sacrificing themselves to make change, to bring attention to the issue, and hopefully hold those that control this homeless services system, make them more accountable, and say, look, this is what happens when services are lacking. We have no choice but to go against the law. We have no choice but to stay in this house, okay? So this story has happened, and now we've reached this point. Okay, everybody knew the sheriff was going to evict them because what they were doing was clearly against local, state, federal laws. You're not allowed to break into a vacant home and occupy it if someone else owns it. Now, I have heard some urban legends and working in social services where I heard of a few homeless people actually identified vacant units that were not having their taxes being paid. And it turns out if you find a vacant unit and you squat in it, and then you end up being the ones paying the property taxes on it, then you can actually retain that property, okay? And I think they purposely didn't go that route because it wouldn't have brought any attention to the issue. They could have found a unit that was vacant, taxes weren't being paid, and paid those property taxes. So it all comes up today. They're evicted. What will happen now, okay? And what I want to know is that, you got all these people protesting online, putting their opinions about how this is such an unjust situation. These moms deserve housing. What I want to know is, since these moms are now officially kicked out of the house, who is going to which one of these protesters or allies is going to come let them live with them? Who's going to offer them housing? Who's going to get them a GoFundMe account and raise the money to try to get them into housing? Because they have refused to go into the shelter system, and I would assume they refuse to go into it because of its substandard quality of services. But now what I want to know is, because I do feel like here in the Bay Area, since we're super left-wing, super liberal, people just kind of jump on the bandwagon. They see something as an injustice and, oh, that's unjust, blah, blah, blah. But now I want to know which one of these people that thinks this is unjust is going to let these families into their homes, okay? So we'll see. Are there gonna be people compassionate enough to say, you can come live with me, or you can rent out my unit at a fair price to what you can afford? What will happen? Will the city and county come in and offer them really, really good housing? Who knows? This is what I'm interested to find out. What's going to happen next? They've made their statement, but now these mothers are literally homeless with children. We're in a country where no mother should be homeless with a child. Who's going to step in? Is the state going to step in? Is an activist going to step in and help them out? Is somebody going to try to get some type of crowdsource funding to help them out? Because ultimately, I'm more concerned about the children. You know what I mean? My heart weeps for the children. Like I said, where are these children and these homeless mothers going to stay after this point? Okay. And another thing I want to say that was interesting, and this always catches my eye when I watched the video this morning of the protesters. And keep in mind that a lot of the context of this case was that this was a battle against gentrification. You know, because of gentrification raising the cost of living, because of that, you know, gentrifiers are to blame for this high cost of living, which was another element of the argument of why it was unjust. Now, when I looked at the protesters, and whenever I actually look at a lot of protests in the Bay Area, it always puzzles me as to why and I know some of y'all might take this the wrong way, so please don't take it the wrong way, is that most of these protesters are white Caucasian individuals. Okay? And so don't take that the wrong way. You know, you do have to, just like Martin Luther King embraced them, you do have to embrace your white allies, because maybe you need them to fulfill the cause or whatever. But I always think it's interesting that the vast majority of the protesters are Caucasian, and it makes me question the genuineness of why they are there. Are they there because they truly care about these people? Are they there protesting because they want to be part of something? Are they there to protest because that's the cool left-wing liberal thing to do? I don't know. And it's almost kind of comical. It's almost like a South Park episode that in this case, they're trying to fight gentrification, but then it looks like all the gentrifiers of West Oakland, the white gentrifiers, are the ones protesting this eviction. So it's like, are you guys protesting? Are the gentrifiers protesting themselves? And I always thought that was something that was an interesting paradox in the Bay Area, because don't get it twisted, even though we're left wing, even though we are a liberal, highly liberal area, that doesn't exempt it from racism. You know, I have a friend, an old coworker, who always used to use the term liberal racist. And I think a lot of white individuals or white liberals or so-called white allies believe they are exempt from being racist and not even noticing their racism. So it's all very interesting to me. It's kind of somewhat comical, but like I said, just because we live in a liberal, so-called liberal, so-called accepting region of the Bay Area, racism is still well and alive in the Bay Area. And I always think it's funny how, you know, when there's a lot of people of color that are victims, why is it that it's mostly white people out there protesting? Okay. And then the other thing is, where's the people of color at? You know what I mean? In these protests. And I've always thought that was interesting, how in a lot of these protests that are supposed to be fighting racial injustice, where are the minorities, or whatever you want to call them, people of color? Where are we in these protest movements? Is it because we are so apathetic that we know the system is broken? We are so jaded that we know no matter how much we protest that nothing will happen? Is it that the white population still has some type of naivety and hope for change and thinks that change can happen if they step in and save the day? Who knows? But why is that? Why is that here in the Bay Area? And this is just something I noticed. Why is it mostly white protesters protesting racial injustice? What do we have to do to get more people of color involved? Okay, because it's not going to work. We can't depend on white protesters to come in and change our situations, you know, because they're not going to be able to understand, relate, or anything like that. We need to change our own situations. Okay, maybe we're too apathetic. That's the conclusion I've came to. People of color are so apathetic about everything. You know, a lot of people of color don't even vote because they know whoever they vote for, nothing's going to change. So what's the point of freaking voting? What's the point of protesting? You know, we've protested and voted for this whole hundreds of years the United States has been in existence, but yet what has that protest and everything led to? And we are still left in the same situations and at the bottom of the totem pole. So just something to think about. Again, like I said, I think these mothers were sacrificing themselves, sacrificing their families to bring the issue to light, and in hopes that it will change something. Hopefully this will make the county tighten up. It will leave them more accountable. And hopefully, because if the county, the city doesn't come in and help these mothers out, which one of these protesters is going to accept these mothers into their homes? That's what I want to know. After these women are released from Santa Rita jail, I want to know where they're going. That's going to be the interesting part of this story. If the state's not going to step in, who's going to step in? Okay. And then again, with the media view of it, how the rebuttal was that the media stated that, oh, well, they should leave the house because this house is going to be used for a homeless shelter for some other people. That's irrelevant. They're still going to flip a profit. Whoever bought this house, yes, they are going to be helping at-risk youth find jobs and things like that. But they're probably going to be paid by HUD or whoever the program that funds this transitional age youth program. They are going to pay them X amount of dollars per head that goes into that building. They only bought the building for $500,000. That's very cheap. They're going to be turning a profit. There's going to be some grant or some housing grant paying these nonprofit homeowner money to house these so-called, at-risk youth. So even though they're helping the youth, don't get it twisted. Just because they're a nonprofit, they're still going to be turning a profit on the house with money from probably federal government housing subsidies. And I think the way the media has framed it is that they need to follow the law, and how dare they stay in the house because this is for some other at-risk population. I don't think that was the point of them. I think they achieved their goal of bringing light to the issue, and now it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully these kids will end up in a safe and stable situation, and hopefully this whole situation doesn't cause like too much trauma and confusion for these children that will possibly reflare later in their lives. So that's pretty much my opinion on the Moms for Housing. Again, some courageous, very brave women, more courageous and brave than I would ever be. So props to them. We'll see what happens. Hopefully the kids end up safe. That is my video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Peace out.